Neren, you hosted this conference today on nationalisation. Firstly, just give us a high-level indication of the response. It must have been a very heated debate forum.
Yes, it was. And the audience stayed with us throughout, which is generally unusual in a protracted debate. It was fairly exciting. It was our first real initiative in terms of a cooperative relationship between business and labour. So we had representatives from COSATU and from FEDUSA join us in our discussion today. The intention behind today's discussion was for SACCI to develop a discussion document based on today's proceedings, which we would then place before our annual convention, which is our largest meeting of our members in any given year. And we have our convention on the 3rd and 4th of October. At that time, our members will then decide what would be the next steps from a SACCI point of view. And possible options there could be to advance the discussion document to a position paper. Another option could be that perhaps at that point, the nationalisation debate loses steam and we may feel that we may not want to add fuel to the fire. But that has been our position in the past. And this year we felt that the debate has evolved to a point where we can no longer be silent on the matter.
Nic, let's throw this to you in Cape Town. The ANC Youth League is behaving somewhat like a dog with a bone here. They're not letting this nationalisation issue go. It's hot on the agenda, and they're calling for nationalisation of mines and farms without compensation. Let's get your thoughts on the debate at this stage.
Look, the ANC Youth League, I think, is doing what it does best. It's speaking to the disenfranchised youth, and it's making the calls that are going to be most powerful to them. I think if you look at the individuals that are leading the ANC Youth League, it would be very difficult to imagine that these are the voices of the disenfranchised and disempowered youth, with the Breitling watches and the Armani suits and the very expensive cars. I think it's a ridiculous notion that that group of people speaks for the marginalized and disenfranchised. I think, interestingly enough, if you go to Frans Baleni and the president of the National Union of Mine Workers, what they've been saying for the last 2 years very clearly is that the ANC Youth League call is irresponsible. It's being led and backed. It's a plot by failing black mining operations that were set up under black economic empowerment deals that were meant to be paid out of the special dividends that were struck that are below water. I think that I obviously read as much as I could about the debate that you had today. I think that there is an element in COSATU. Of course COSATU wants the mines to be nationalised. Of course they want to all be civil servants and with jobs for life in a Greek-style economy. But we know where that leads. And COSATU is a sectional, narrow interest in our society that is pursuing its sectional, narrow ends, which is to lock in the benefits of its members and lock in the already employed.
Nic, I just want to bring it back.
It's not going to lead to any economic growth.
I just want to bring it back to studio, and this is going to be a passionate 15-minute debate, gentlemen. Today we had Roger Baxter, he's the chief economist at the Chamber of Mines, saying that if nationalisation is introduced, David, South African equity markets will collapse.
Not only will South African equity markets, South Africa Inc. will collapse. The whole country will collapse. The rand will go to I don't know what levels. At the end of the day, mining production is already in a decline. Gold mining production, I think in the last quarter we saw fell 5.8%. Can you imagine where it will go? So at the end, we will go into a Rhodesia or Zimbabwe, type decline. That's exactly what we'll be. There will be no foreign investment. This is a country that ever since gold was discovered in 1886 has been financed by foreign investment. Write it off. We're a non-saving nation. We don't save. We rely on foreigners. So you can have it. You can have the gold mines because they'll be worthless.
Craig, is it even in your wildest dreams possible that this could be a tangible agenda in South Africa?
Look, one would hope that it isn't. We can never say never. Just being in the markets for a long time, you can never say never. Things happen that you don't contemplate, and sometimes the worst things do happen. But I think it's a remote possibility. I think if we look to those Anglo-American results that we had last week, Cynthia Carroll making the strong point that privatization doesn't work. Obviously, as a miner, she's going to say something like that. But she did make the point that 2.6% of this country's GDP is made up by Anglo's production. And mining itself makes up 8% of the country's production, GDP. So if the public sector starts taking over that, and as Rowan Ackerman said, notoriously inefficient at these kinds of things, we would lose that production and our GDP would falter.
Nick, throwing it back to you in Cape Town and taking Craig's words into account that there's a very remote possibility. Would you agree with that?
I must tell you, I've just returned from 2 weeks speaking to foreign fund managers about this issue specifically. My view, and it's obviously not a special inside track view, it's just knowing the ANC and how it does things. I don't think it's going to nationalize the mines. I think they might set up a state-owned mining company. I think they might bail out some of those BE deals. I think they might even send some mines to the way of the ANC Youth League. But I think in general, they're not going to touch the sector. What they are going to do is try and get more out of the sector. They're going to use the threat of nationalization as a stick to beat the miners with, to possibly impose super taxes, to at least change the taxation environment, and to oblige the miners to fulfill various other aspects of social credits, maybe take care of the last few hundred kilometers of transport networks leading up to the mines, possibly adding some electricity generation, and then sticking to the mining charter obligations that they already have. I think that's what's ultimately going to happen. I don't think there's any possibility of the mines being nationalized. I'm completely sure of this. But obviously we've got to have it as a remote possibility. It would be irresponsible not to.
Neren, the overriding conclusions at today's debate from your perspective, are they in line with what is being discussed on the desk this evening?
Yes, the strong perspective was that nationalization is not a real possibility. It's not an alternative to be discussed in an economic context. But of course, we had very strong counter views as well, with COSATU's reading of a recent interaction with the ANC on their current research, leading them to believe that there are alternatives being contemplated. Our reading from the same interaction was that nationalization is still being researched from a policy point of view. It's not at the point of considering alternatives. So clearly two different interpretations of hopefully the same event. Where the disenfranchised are concerned, because that's where the popular support becomes an issue, and that's where the support is presumed to be. The conclusion was that there isn't a strong representative of the disenfranchised, and it's not the Youth League currently as they position themselves to be. There was also an analysis of the change in voting patterns over time, and what we're seeing is while the DA gained support and the ANC relatively seems to be losing some support, the majority of voters are just not voting over time and becoming disillusioned with the direction the economy is taking, but not having a viable alternative to cast their vote for. And so these are the context within which this debate was conducted. There were a number of very interesting points in terms of nationalization being an extreme policy measure to achieve other more moderate objectives from the current perspective. So as Nick said, opening the door to changes and being used tactically in that context. That was also proposed from a number of different angles, with a number of different outcomes being envisioned for such a strategy.
Just Bronwyn, on those changes, it's all very well to demand those changes, but in order to bring about an expansion of mining, and we've lagged the rest of the world in what is probably one of the strongest cycles we've had ever in commodities. One of the reasons is that the infrastructure just hasn't been built. There's no railway system, there's no electricity. We've run out of electricity. You have to provide the electricity. You know, mines are still operating below maximum in electricity. So all those issues have to be addressed, you know, if you're going to make demands on mines to actually meet or expand. So there's a lot that government has to do as well to, you know, to play the game. And don't put the blame on the miners.
The bottom line is, though, with such a heated debate taking place in a public forum across the country, as Nick pointed out earlier, Craig, we are really detracting from the idea that foreign direct investment or that South Africa is a friendly place for foreign direct investment.
Very much so. We are playing out this debate in the headlines, and none of it's good, and it's protracted. It looks like they're only going to come out with some kind of an investigation result, you know, towards the end of the year. That's a lot of months to go around with a lot of uncertainty.
And a lot of news headlines.
And a lot of news headlines. And as long as that drags out, we're not going to get any foreign direct investment. Sure, we're seeing money into the market, in the bond market, and that's just a pure yield play, hot money, but we're not seeing infrastructure and real stuff on the ground happening.
Neren, was much attention given to the fact that a continued debate on nationalisation is going to be detrimental to South Africa in itself, irrespective of the conclusion.
Yes, definitely so. That was one of the themes that came out of the meeting. But as a chamber, we've already held the view that over the last 2 years, we've already lost a lot of foreign investment interest. We've already lost a lot of foreign stakeholder interest. And this has been going on for a while, and we can't quantify it. All we can attest to is that in our engagements with the diplomatic corps in South Africa, in our engagements with foreign delegations visiting South Africa, they consistently point to the debate around nationalisation as the most harmful event in South Africa. And this is after only a few years before crime being the issue that they pointed to as number one. So nationalisation has quickly become, from an economic point of view, an enemy to the South African economy in terms of its openness to the globe.
Nic, we are running out of time, but just back to you in Cape Town for a final comment. Looking at the heavy weighting that mining companies have in South Africa's economy, surely a compensation bill itself would actually lead to a bankrupt state.
Yeah, I think Reuters published those figures on the day before yesterday. Let me just say, after this debate this morning, I got at least 4 calls from people I'd seen in the last 3 weeks, big holders of South African mining equity, who are saying, well, what's going on? Is this actually, is this now, has the terms of the debate changed? The debate is amazingly damaging. When you've got COSATU, which is, as I mentioned, a narrow sectional interest, and the ANC Youth League, which doesn't bear describing, setting the terms of the debate. Where is government? Why is government not coming out and arguing a position and saying a case, saying, well, we're discussing it? And gradually, if you listen to SHABANGU's words, gradually backing down. There was no over my dead body this time, you might have noticed.